Hey guys, it's me Kevin and welcome to another AFL analysis video, and this time I will be predicting the 2020 AFL season because it is 1 week away from commencement, so it's time for me to predict the ladder, which I've been trying to work on throughout the whole off-season, but now we've gathered the information based on the trade period and the Marsh series, which has just been completed, and now I can finally do the ladder prediction and tell you what I think the ladder will look like at the end of 2020. Number 18 will be Gold Coast. Not much of a surprise there. I don't feel like they will finish last. I feel like they've improved, but at the same time, I can't analyse another team that's more inexperienced than the Suns are. Maybe Adelaide, but that's about it. I just feel with the Gold Coast Suns, yes, they've had a very good off-season, probably their most successful since they've actually joined the bloody competition. And their Marsh Community Series has been quite good. But remember, this is the team that always starts off well, and then after about 2 months of footy, they just crash, all right? So I bet you the Marsh will be no different. This year will be no different. They're definitely going to be developing, and I definitely see big things for Gold Coast in a few years' time, but I feel like their best 22, there's going to be a lot of draftees from 2018 and 2019 in that side, and they're still not very experienced, to say the least. So I think Gold Coast, in a little bit more time, they need to develop. Number 17 will be a massive fall from grace, and that will go to GWS. What happened? They lost by 89 points in the grand final, and we know when teams lose by a massive margin late in the season, they drop off, okay? It happened to Port Adelaide, happened to Melbourne, it happened to Sydney, all lots of teams, okay? And GWS, they're a team that always gets injuries, and they're going to have a mass injury crisis, and they're going to just crash to 17. Number 17 for real this time will be an Exodus-depleted Adelaide. They lost 7 players in the off-season, 6 of them to other clubs, including the resignation of Coach Don Pike. So they've got a new coach, Matthew Nix, who wasn't really a big signing, to be honest with you. And I feel like under his first season, he's going to be trying to get youth into Adelaide, into Adelaide's new draftees. And whilst they do have some decent players like Crouch, Walker, who's getting old by the way, and Sloan, I do feel that this year it's going to be a season getting experience into the Adelaide youngsters. And like Gold Coast, I feel they might start off promising, but then fall apart massively towards the end. I feel this year is going to be a transition and learning year for Adelaide, and I don't think finals is on the agenda at all. Number 16th will be an injury-depleted Fremantle. We were hoping a season of improvement under Justin Longmuir, our new coach, after Ross Lyon was sacked after a few years of mediocrity. But we seem to have a big problem with injury right now. I mean, we've lost Mundy, we've lost Pierce, Hamling, Akers, Hill. Again, I said it in the last year's ladder prediction. I don't know what's happening with Stephen Hill. Jesse Ogan's out indefinitely, and even Sean Darcy, I'm not sure what's going on with him. So we've got a lot of injuries. And whilst Fremantle's best 22, they've got a good 22 that can beat most teams on the day, but they don't have any depth at all. And their midfield's weak and unproven, given that they just lost Hill and Langdon in the off-season. So their midfield's weak. Their defence, they've lost several players there, and their forward, shaky. I just feel Fremantle are going to struggle, especially in the early parts of the season when half their side is out. Number 15 will be Sydney. They're a decent side, but they're very inexperienced at the same time. I mean, they just lost a whole lot of experience last year to retirement, including Heath Grundy, Nick Smith, Kieran Jack, and Jared McVeigh. Don't get me wrong, they've got some good young talent on the side like Mills, Heaney and Blakely, and I do think Dylan Steffens should be alright, but I do feel that Sydney, they're very young and inexperienced, and I feel like this year will be another year of transition for the Swans and trying to get experience into them. They will improve if Lance Franklin does get out on the park a bit more, but otherwise they might actually finish a bit lower if Lance Franklin gets injured again. Number 14 will be Carlton. I was hoping they would rise this year under David Teague, and he definitely did give him a lot of promise last year after he won 6 out of 11 games to finish off the season. But the thing is, they've had some injuries, particularly in the forward line, such as Curnow and Harry Mackay, so that might prove problematic. They've still got a very young list, and David Teague would still have to work out a game plan for these players. And I feel like they're heavily reliant on Paddy Cripps plus some of their other experienced players. So I feel like Carlton, I feel like their rise might be another year or two away. Number 13 is North Melbourne. I don't know what to make of this side. I mean, they've got some experienced talent like Jack Zeeble, Todd Goldstein, Sean Higgins, Robbie Tarrant, Ben Cunningham, Ben Brown. He's in very good form. But at the same time, I feel like they've also got some very inexperienced players. And actually, Thompson was a big loss down back. He was their main intercepting defender. He was a massive loss for the Roos. I'm not sold on North Melbourne. Their Marsh Community Series was average at best, in my opinion. I feel like North Melbourne will be competitive for most of the season, but I feel like they'll be very inconsistent as well. I think it will take a while for North Melbourne to actually become really good under Shaw. I'm just not sold about them at the moment. In 12th spot is Melbourne. I don't know what to make of this side because in one sense, they could be a very good side. This was a team that made the preliminary final 2 years ago and then got absolutely smashed to the Eagles. But on the other sense, they haven't exactly had the best off-season. They have had several surgeries to players like Gawn, both captains, and I feel like I've heard that they've lost several other key players through surgeries as well. So I think that will set them back for a while. But at the same time, if their Marsh Community Series is any correct indication, they might actually be back to potentially somewhat their best. Probably not their greatest, but to a team that can win at least 50% of their games. And I feel like Melbourne, they're going to be an inconsistent team. They're also very young, let's remember. So they've still got some learning to do, the Demons, so I think they'll be alright, but not the greatest. In 11th spot is Essendon. I had them in the bottom 4 initially because of the amount of off-season injuries they've had. I mean, like Fantasia, Happel, Bell Chambers, Joe Danaher is still out. Then we had that absence with McKenna, and that threw him off course. And whilst he is probably going to come back in time for round 1, he has had a limited preseason. And that's been the case with most players, actually, to be honest with you. Well, but at the same time, they look quite impressive against the Eagles and did enough to win against Geelong. And at their best, they can actually play quite well, this Essendon side. Shear was another player that had an interrupted preseason. I feel like they're going to start off slow because of the injuries, but then I feel like as they start to recover and start to get back together and start to gel back together, I feel like Essendon might have a spurt home, but it won't be enough to make the finals. Number 10, I've got Geelong, and this is purely due to age. I mean, we're talking about a lot of aging stars like Gary Ablett, Selwood, Dangerfield, Hawkins. How much time have they got left, really? That's the question we've got to be asking. I mean, some of those guys we're not sure if they should retire or stay, and then after the events of last year where they wasted a preliminary final after going 20 points up and then lose, I feel like it's a sign that Geelong are dropping off, particularly that back half. Whilst they were very impressive in the front half of 2019, a win-loss record throughout round 14 till the rest of the season really showed that Geelong, they're faltering. I feel like they're aging, and whilst at their best they can play quite well, I do see Geelong as an ageing side, and I do see Geelong quite vulnerable. And that's why I think they'll miss the A. Also, given that there are some teams that always fall out of the A, and I think Geelong will be one of the sides that will do it. Number 9, I've got Richmond. Oh, we came 9th again. I could just see the amount of angry faces from Richmond supporters when I said that. But don't worry, that was a joke. Number 9 for real this time is St Kilda. They had an impressive off-season, to be honest. After signing Brett Ratton as their new head coach, they got some much-needed pace on the outside in Zach Jones and Brad Hill. Plus, they brought in Paddy Ryder for the ruck, and they also got Dougal Howard and Dan Butler as well. So, very productive off-season for St Kilda, despite the fact they lost Bruce and Stephen, but I feel like the 5 outweigh the 2. Their pre-season games between Hawthorn and Collingwood have been quite impressive. They showed grit throughout their 2 wins and competitiveness, but there's one thing about St Kilda, and that I feel that they're not just gelled just yet. I feel like they need a bit more time to actually develop as a team, and apart from the names I said, there aren't many other big names. It's more of an average sort of team. Although they've got some good players like Ross and Carlisle and Geary, which they were missing last year, I do feel that St Kilda is still a second-tier side, not a top-tier side. And that's why I have them missing out of the finals this year, but I do feel that it's a positive future for St Kilda. Number 7, I've put Port Adelaide, mainly due to their piss-easy fixture. I mean, they've got some good stars on their side, which unfortunately are aging. I mean, we're talking about Robbie Gray and Travis Boak and Justin Westhoff, for example. But they've also got some really good young stars on their list, like Connor Rosie, Zach Butters, Xavier Dersma, and, well, Gregoriadis, or however you pronounce his name, Mitch Gregoriadis, sorry if I pronounced it wrong. He seemed very good in that Marsh hit-out. I was watching it. He seemed quite decent, actually. I do feel Port Adelaide, at their best, they can play well. I just think that they're very inconsistent. And that will be an issue for Port Adelaide, inconsistency. But at the same time, when you've got a fixture as easy as what Port Adelaide has, there is no reason they shouldn't make the top 8. Number 8, I've got Brisbane, mainly due to a harder fixture and the fact that their side is still quite young. Last year was impressive, let's just say that. It was very impressive seeing a young Brisbane side go from 15th to 2nd. Could have been first if Michael Walters' poster had been stopped. Imagine if Michael Walters had not kicked that behind after the siren, Brisbane would have finished on top. What a story that would have been, and I wish that actually happened. But anyway, nonetheless, Brisbane had a very impressive season last year, but now they've got a harder fixture, and let's not forget, their list is still very young. How will they cope losing in straight sets, especially given that both games are at home? So there's obviously a bit of development still to go. That being said, they've been quite stable. I know they got rid of a bit of depth, but in terms of their best 22, they're quite stable. And the other thing is, the Gabba, that's going to be a hard place for other teams to win at. And I think Brisbane, I think Brisbane will have a very good fortress at the Gabba and will win a lot of home games. I think they're still going to be a quite impressive side this year, but I don't think they'll be as strong as last. Just noting out, if you're wondering why I said 7th will be Port Adelaide and 8th will be Brisbane, that's because I actually swapped the 2 around after making the video. Port Adelaide 8th and Brisbane 7th. 6th spot will be Hawthorn. They were quite impressive in the back half of last year, and they've actually blooded some quite decent young talent such as Mitch Lewis and James Warple, who actually won the Hawthorn's Best and Fairest award in only his 2nd season, so that was quite an impressive achievement from him. And you add back Tom Mitchell, and that's a pretty decent midfield that you've got there. And they've also added John Patton and Sam Frost into either end of the ground as key stocks, so I feel like Hawthorn, they're starting to regenerate after a lot of their three-time premiership stars retired a few years ago, or went to other clubs. One thing with Hawthorn, they've still got some unproven talent on their side, and they're also quite inconsistent. and Alistair Clarkson might take a while for Hawthorn to get going, like in the last few years. So that's why I think Hawthorn will only be 6. That said, they could surprise quite a few teams this year. 5th spot will be GWS. One of the reasons why I think they'll fall out of the top 4 is because of last year's grand final thumping. And usually when teams get smashed by a large margin in a prelim or grand final, they usually don't respond well the next year and fall outside the 8. I feel like they'll be different with the Giants. One of the biggest reasons is because they're one of the most complete sides in the competition. I mean, we're talking about a midfield that includes Whitfield, Canelio, Kelly, Taranto when he is playing, and Hopper, just to list a few. And you're talking about a forward line with Cameron and Finlayson, and a back line with players like Haynes and Cameron and Davis. And also throw it back in Wood, who was injured last year, for all of last year. They've got a very strong side there. I just feel like mentality will get the better of them at parts of the season, and that's why I think the Giants won't make the top 4. Also, injury might strike any type soon, and Giants are world-renowned for getting injured, so I feel like that might happen again this year. And that's why I said maybe they might finish second last. In 4th spot, I've got the West Coast Eagles. Aging side, but they're still going to be good for a few years. I mean, you throw in Kelly to one of the strongest midfields in the competition, which also involve Shuey, Gaff, Yo, and then you've also got McGovern up back. You've got Natanui returning into the ruck, and then you've got Kennedy and Darling in the forward. And the Eagles have had a very good off-season in terms of injuries. They haven't had many injuries at all, apart from McGovern, to my knowledge. Apart from that, they've been quite strong, and they've also boasted a lot of All-Australians on that side. And also when you take into account that a lot of teams hate going to Optus Stadium and a lot of teams blow over there, the Eagles are going to be up there again. One reason why I think the Eagles won't be in the top 2, maybe because of their inconsistency and their tendency to drop games when they shouldn't. And also, I feel like they're aging a bit. So, yeah, I feel like the Eagles, they're going to be good, but I don't feel they'll be the best. 3rd spot, I've got the Western Bulldogs. They don't really deserve to be ranked 3rd, but let's face it, they've got an extremely easy fixture. I mean, GWS is the only side the Bulldogs played twice from last year's top 8. I mean, and for someone who just made the finals last year, I feel like that's pretty lucky for them to only have to play GWS twice. And I mean, they play Colton twice and Fremantle twice. They'll probably be 4 easy wins you could rack up there. And for their list themselves, they haven't changed much. If anything, they've only added, really. I mean, they've added Alex Keith down back. They've got Josh Bruce up forward, which they've added. And when you look at their midfield unit, it is bloody scary. You've got players like Bontempelli, McRae, Dunkley, Hunter. It is a very scary midfield unit, and that's one of the main reasons I've actually got them in the top 4, apparently, by the way, is because of their midfield. So I feel like they're a relatively complete side, and plus you've also got Aaron Norton, who's one of the most exciting young players in the competition. So you've got a rather complete and quite solid side, plus a very easy fixture. There's no reason they shouldn't finish in the top 4. And I'll tell you something, if they do finish minor premiership, they would be bloody arrogant not to have sent a thank you letter to Travis Auld. Number 2, I've got Collingwood. Not much has really changed in the off-season, and they still boast one of the strongest sides in the competition. I mean, 5 players are selected for State of Origin, and when you've got a team like Collingwood, there is no reason why they shouldn't finish top 2. I mean, they've been underachieving in the last 2 years. Not so much 2018, actually. I mean, they were probably unlucky not to win the premiership, but 2019, I feel like they underachieved, having lost to an injury-depleted Giants side. That might only sting Collingwood, and that might give them more determination, or it might do the opposite and sap mentality out of them and give them a negative mentality. But I feel that with a side like Collingwood, who boast a lot of talent on their side, and they just recently signed Brodie Grundy on a 7-year deal. So I think Collingwood will be like they were in the last 2 years, another big shot at the premiership. And number 1 will be, unfortunately, Richmond. I mean, let's face it, the last 12 rounds of last season, they looked unstoppable. I mean, to be honest, they could have easily gone undefeated if their full team was fit for the entire year. That their injury crisis was I would think, stopping them from an undefeated season, really. So yeah, I feel like Richmond will be very strong this season if all their players stay fit. I think one of the only reasons why they wouldn't win all their games is because of their record away from home. It hasn't been very flash. But beating Brisbane at the Gabba in an elimination in a qualifying final shows that they can still beat quality sides on the road. And given that they just come off a premiership, I think there'll be a lot of positivity, and I think they're the obvious fit for the minor premiership in 2020. So I hope you liked the video. Please subscribe. Please give it a thumbs up. Comment what you think of the video down below, and please comment your ladder predictions as well. And share this video with other people and try and help this channel grow, because I'm going to be doing a lot of AFL content, including tipping as well. So yeah, the tipping series will be coming back, 2020 AFL tipping. And I might also be doing other sport reviews as well. So and other AFL content. So share this with other people and subscribe. And I'll see you next week in time for the AFL season. Goodbye.